So, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good night, wherever you're joining us. We are here at the LFAAS 2026 conference, and our theme is adaptation and collaboration. And because our theme is collaboration, Julie and I, as the editors of the mentoring program in adaptation today, thought that it wouldn't be fair not to mention our, collaborative baby as a community of the last 2 years, adaptation today, and try some new things for it. I would like to briefly talk about what we're going to do today because I assume that this is going to be interesting and different to many of us, including us. So the idea for Pitch Your colleague actually grew out of our mentorship poll results. Many respondents, and I am sure you guys are among them, said that what they wanted most from adaptation today was the chance to find collaborators, people they could form working groups with, even set up writing labs together. And Julia and I, of course, love that idea, but we quickly realized that it wasn't realistic for us to directly organize and maintain such groups. Instead, we thought Pitch Your colleague could be a lighter but still meaningful way to spark those connections. So the goal here is to help us see beyond CVs and publications and get a sense of who we'd actually like to collaborate with. Because as we all know, someone can be a brilliant scholar, but necessarily the right fit as a colleague, and that's okay. From there, it's up to individuals, it's up to you to carry these things forward if you're interested. So truth be told, the idea came to us from Queer Keep bar nights in Philadelphia, where people pitch their friends for dating. And Julia and I thought that it was so ridiculous that it might be actually be perfect fit for academia. Only instead of finding a soulmate, you're finding a collaborator. And honestly, isn't co-writing just sometimes just as intense as dating anyway? So today the emphasis is on connection, humor, and community building. And think of this as a way of celebrate each other's work and personalities while hopefully sparking future collaborations. Julie, is there anything you would like to add on top of all these things? Please go ahead.
No, that was perfect. Thank you so much, Seda. So, with a sort of humble wish that you all take this as the first pancake. Thank you, thank you. And should I begin?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. All right. I would like to pitch my friend and colleague Beth Coggeshall. So, who is here? But actually there she is, but I'm gonna I'm gonna share I'm gonna share my slides. So I have some slides here. There we go. And hopefully this works. And I need to, okay, there she is, Beth. So Beth earned her PhD from Stanford University, and she specializes in the literature and culture of medieval Italy with a particular focus on Dante. Her research centers on the intersections of literature, ethics, and cultural identity, medievalism and popular culture, and the transmedia reception of Dante's works across contemporary global cultures. So her book on Amista, Negotiating Friendship in Dante's Italy, was published by the University of Toronto Press in 2023. In her book, she argues that the disputes over the nature and uses of amista, friendship, in medieval Italian literary culture paved the way for the wholesale recuperation of friendship in its many forms among the early humanists. She's discussed the book in more detail on 2 podcasts, The History of Literature and the New Books Network. In addition to this research, she is also the co-editor with Ariel Saber from Johns Hopkins University of the website Dante Today, Sightings and Sightings of Dante's Works in Contemporary Culture, a curated crowdsourced digital archive that showcases Dante's sustained presence in contemporary culture. This is such an exciting adaptation project. To further this research, she was part of the inaugural class of faculty fellows in Florida State University's Demos Institute for Data Humanities 2019 to 2020, and has participated in the FSU Library's Pen and Ink program. Beth has received awards for excellence in teaching from the Southeastern Medieval Association and the FSU chapter of Phi Beta Kappa, as well as the University Teaching Award for undergraduate teaching and the Undergraduate Research Mentor Award. She currently serves as the Director of Education and Outreach of the Dante Society of America, through which she helps to administer the Dante Society's Dante Speakers Bureau. Beth's second book emerges from her long-standing interest in and research on the global transmedia reception of Dante's works across contemporary, especially popular cultures. In Dante's Memes, How the Divine Comedy Spreads Across Everyday Culture, she examines a series of cultural elements that emerge from Dante's poem, but gradually take on a life of their own, mutating as they spread across digital and popular global cultures. Through her examination of blogs, social media posts, infographics, and other digital artifacts, Beth contests that the inherent spreadability, that's a term from Henry Jenkins, of the comedy lies in the incomplete puzzle that the poem presents to its reader. Where the author might have insisted that the reader interpret its figures according to fixed hermeneutic standards, the poem's participatory allegorical mechanisms instead invite an active and open-ended collaboration with its readers and users, thus engendering the endless string of appropriations, adaptations, and remixes that proliferate across contemporary global cultures. And speaking of active and open-ended collaborations, I want to end my remarks by saying that there isn't a more engaged and collegial scholar of adaptation studies than Beth Coggeshall. I have been honored to get to know Beth through her presence at and leadership within the South Atlantic MLA Conference, SAMLA. As some of you may know, Beth has taken over the organization of adaptation panels for SAMLA, which meets in the fall. Years back, Barton Palmer began this co-opting of successive panels at SAMLA for the adaptation studies community, which is why we see the Association of Adaptation Studies as an affiliate organization of SAMLA's. For years following, Tom Leitch organized these panels with others such as Dennis Perry and Kate Newell stepping in as well. And now Beth Coggeshall is taking the lead in soliciting panels and papers and organizing them, for which those of us who attend SAMLA regularly are very grateful. Please look for CFPs from Beth for this fall, perhaps through the Adaptation Today listserv. And again, if you are not yet a member of the Adaptation Today listserv, please join ASAP. It's a major resource for those of us working in the field. Finally, with great admiration, I would like to introduce, there's Adaptation Today. I'd like to introduce Beth Coggeshall.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks so much for that. This is I didn't totally know what to say in my remarks. It's, almost as embarrassing as an actual first date would be if my friend were to introduce me to someone. Um, but I just prepared a couple of notes, and I'm going to try not to go on too long about introducing myself since Julie already did so much. Thank you, Julie, so much for your introduction. Thank you also for inviting me to be part of this session in the first place. This is just like such a wonderful opportunity, and it's frankly the thing that I've loved most about joining the adaptation studies community. I've found it to be such a welcoming space where I can test out ideas that might not fly in my home field of medieval studies. I'm sure that you can all imagine that medieval studies tends to be more conservative in its approaches, and it's often like fairly closed and hierarchical in its orientation to newcomers or outsiders in the field. And so I found it really liberating to engage in discussions with colleagues who work on texts and time periods that are so very different from my own, but whose conversation over the past couple of years has been really generative for me in bringing new approaches to the very old texts that I study. I wanted to say also that my work in adaptation studies, I tend to work broadly with methodologies that are borrowed from digital humanities and public humanities. I work a lot with active and participatory publics, both inside and outside of academia, including artists, writers, curators, marketing teams, and for lack of a better word, fans of Dante's poem. I've written about the participatory nature of our project's public orientation in an essay that was published in the journal PMLA last year. That's a piece that I'm really proud of and that I'd be happy to share with anyone who's interested. So you can just email me. I'll put my email in the chat when I'm done speaking. Generally, I'm interested in questions of canonicity, of authorship and authority, of fandom and audience, of memes and virality, and I'm using transmedia and franchise theory to think transhistorically about what I think of as a medieval franchise. I've really enjoyed this morning's sessions and discussions about adaptation networks and franchises, about readers and audiences, about the memification of literary classics. These are all things that I feel genuinely connected to. And I'm really delighted to be able to network, collaborate, or just chat with anyone in the field. I just wanted to say one more thing. I really don't want to speak too long, but I wanted to say one quick word about collaboration, which has been really central to my projects in adaptation studies. When I was working on my first book project that Julie mentioned, that project is, a traditional historical single author monograph. And so I had to close myself up in libraries or in archives. I had to kind of chain myself to the desk and surround myself with primary source texts and reams of secondary materials. I was working solo on that project, almost exclusively by myself, and I found that my students were interested in what I was doing, but they couldn't really participate in what I was doing unless I would have tasked them to act as research assistants to whom I could have punted discrete tasks. I didn't especially want to do that. And so, with my digital project on contemporary adaptations of Dante's poem across media and across the globe, I really am able to welcome students in as fellow researchers who have their own interests and questions, curiosities, observations about the data or about the project as a whole. My students have worked on the project as junior editors, and they've helped us to navigate the different phases of our digital project's now 20-year lifespan. It was the website was first posted in 2006. Um, and now my students are participating in the larger project by presenting their work at conferences or turning their research into thesis projects or even publications. I'm thinking about the excellent panel of Katie's students that we heard from yesterday, for example. These are junior researchers who become apprentices on our larger research projects, not appendages to our scholarship. Um, the last thing I want to say is that when I was preparing these notes, when I was thinking about what I was going to say, I was reminded of my first SAMLA presentation a couple of years ago, where, like so many other scholars, I began with a disclaimer that I am not an adaptation studies scholar, after which Tom pulled me aside and very gently chided me. I'm sure this is something that we've all noticed. It's a common pattern, and I've often wondered why this is a common pattern among adaptation studies panels specifically. My hunch is that um, so many of us come from disciplines that like condition us to be suspicious of outsiders or to feel unsure of our footing or to be worried about what we haven't read or how we're unprepared or underprepared. And so we feel like we need to disarm our audiences and mark ourselves out as outsiders before we even begin to speak. And I was thinking about this yesterday too, when there was a brief discussion of accents in second languages in a midday panel. And what I found is like my so far fairly limited experience in the community of adaptation studies scholars has shown me that this community seems to behave in the opposite way. For me, adaptation studies has really proved to be a space of support, of collaboration, experimentation, and thought partnership, whether with colleagues in the field or with students at my home institution or elsewhere, with publics in the digital sphere. So I'm really delighted now to count myself as an adaptation studies scholar and as well as a medievalist and Italianist. And I'm grateful once again to Julie for pitching me here and for this panel as a whole. So thanks.
We're so happy that you joined the crowd, Beth. Tom, would you like to go ahead with Katie or? Is that all
Well,
right?
she turns on her camera.
There it is.
Okay, Katie.
Do you have presentations? I mean, PowerPoint?
No, no PowerPoint. So when
Oh,
John invited me to the room, I said thanks, but
no,
no.
so that I can spotlight you both so we can look at you even bigger.
Well, I can see me fine. Okay,
There you
okay.
go.
Ah, yes. Katie, I see you're using the same wallpaper I used to use. When Seda first pitched the idea of a pitch session to me, I felt very ill at ease because I couldn't find the Goldilocks zone for candidates to pitch. Should I pitch my own graduate students? No, that was too incestuous. Or should I pitch X or Y? And I thought about X or Y, and I approached X and Y, and they both said, "Oh, I'm going to pitch somebody else." So I thought, okay, they're too far along. But once Katie McClain agreed that I could pitch her, I felt completely at ease. In a world of adaptation, she has already shown a remarkable ability to adapt to changing circumstances, moving, for example, from the University of Kentucky, where she wrote her dissertation on 21st century adaptations of early 20th century protest literature, to Colorado Mesa University, where she has put her own distinctive spin on required courses like first year comp and American literature, and turning her sections into courses on plot twists and subverted expectations, or masculinity in early American literature, or loneliness and the need for social connection. More to the point of this pitch, Katie is a perfect collaborator because she already lives most deeply as a collaborator. Here I'll detour for a minute. A few years ago, my daughter, who's a professor of social work and a clinical social worker, asked me why virtually all my own publications were single authored. Wouldn't it have been easier to share the burden with someone else? She said. I pointed out that although collaboration was the norm in publication in the hard sciences and the social sciences, like social work, it was the exception in the humanities. That's certainly true. I mean, it's true. It's true now, and it was true when I said it to my daughter. But that's not the reason I said it. The reason I said it is that I did not want to admit that collaboration has never come easily to me. I'm deeply grateful for the one time I co-edited a collection of essays because I learned so much about editing from that experience, but I would never do it again. I find it much easier to edit on my own than to have even the world's best collaborator constantly second guess me. And the limited number of courses that I have team taught has just confirmed my sense that team teaching isn't for me. But none of this is true of Katie, whose current work in progress, a monograph on 21st century considerations of authorized grief and adapted violence, a project that I think is now under contract to Palgrave Macmillan, is something of an outlier from her many collaborative projects. Her work with Rachel Hartnett on podcasts and stakeholders in the first year college classroom, her gathering of essays by several colleagues for a special cluster of South Atlantic Review recently, her co-editorship with Rachel of Remaking Multiplicities, about which she spoke yesterday, her assembling of her students' work on Oz adaptations into a terrific panel yesterday evening, or afternoon, or morning, and most important, her wonderful work on the listserv adaptation today. Instead of going on and tooting her credentials and then giving Katie time to blow her own horn, we both thought it would be more fun and sort of more collaborative to try our hand at a semi-improvised conversation, which I will kick off with a question. Katie, how did you come to get involved with adaptation today? Is there a story here?
Oh, there's definitely a story here. Also, first off, I just want to say before I get too deep into conversation with you, Tom, I am so honored that you asked me to do this with you. And I'm really excited to be here with everybody. I'm also really glad that we're continuing to pitch adaptation today to talk about collaboration. Yes, I want everyone to join the listserv, please. There's so many great people, including Julie and Seda, who work on this project, and everybody can collaborate and join, also including Beth, who just published, as I put in the chat. So This project mostly came out of SAMLA, interestingly enough, where I was sitting at a table with Gracie Bain and Kristen Figgins, who has put together so much of this listserv and work for Adaptation Today. And we were early career scholars who kind of sat together and said, we don't really talk much outside of seeing each other at this conference. And we feel like we would like to know more what's going on all the time. And so we wrote down our emails on this very, very tiny piece of paper that SAMLA gives you that is like taking notes that you can keep with yourself that you hope you don't lose. And thankfully, Kristen didn't. And she actually was like, we're going to do something with this. And she put together this idea for a listserv. And a few months later, she sent out an email to people that said, hey, is anyone interested in working on this thing? And I immediately was like, yes, please. I want to do this. I want to take part in this. This is going to be a fantastic resource, I think. And it's grown beyond anything I could have imagined, honestly. I know last year at this conference, we had a panel of Adaptation Today Slightly Aged. And now this year we're doing this project. But I just hope everybody here can continue to collaborate with us and send us great materials and join the podcast and all that kind of stuff.
I remember that one of the last conversations I had with Lars Elstrom was about how you can tell that a conference has been a success. And the big criterion that we both shared was, are people who came to the conference still in touch with each other a year later? We were so shocked that we agreed about that, because we never agreed about anything, that we didn't do anything. And I cannot tell you how much I admire and how grateful I am to you and Gracie and Kristen especially for actually doing something to keep us together. Yes, thank you.
Yes.
How successful do you think the listserv has been in creating adaptation communities?
I mean, I'm biased, and I think we always have to admit to our biases because they're very real, but I think it's been very successful. I can't believe how many people constantly are sending like calls for publications, for conferences, for really just cool presentations they're doing, publications they've already done that they want to share. It's fantastic how often I learn about things specifically just because, I woke up that morning and there's an email of someone being like, hey, I did a cool thing. Do you want to know about it? And I'm like, I do. Thank you for telling me, because it's so hard to keep track of those things. And, Beth was talking about how adaptation as a community, like the adaptation field is so welcoming. And I agree. Like as a grad student, I felt so welcomed to be able to present my thoughts and learn from everybody at the different conferences I went to. I still feel that way now as I'm trying to kind of start more of my own work and establish those connections overall. And I think we're a very collaborative space, whether you're officially, to go off what you said yesterday, Tom, whether we're officially writing with each other or not, we're all talking to each other all the time. We're asking each other for ideas. And Adaptation Today is just a fantastic extension of that.
I know that Beth already talked a little bit about the point that you just made, the relation between, or how the adaptation studies community compares to other scholarly communities. And I should add to what Beth said about me when I gently chided her, because she had said, well, I'm not really an adaptation person. I believe that I made my stock response to Beth, which was, well, none of us is an adaptation person. I don't know of anyone who makes a living teaching adaptation. So we're all outsiders here. I think it was Julian Saint-Jacques who had first made this point maybe 20 years ago. What's it like to be a member of a community that has no members?
I think we're doing pretty okay building community, honestly. But I think the beauty of adaptation studies is that I get to learn about so many different things. And everybody brings their own expertise, but then we have these wonderful overlaps where we can see how we can collaborate together and learn from each other. I mean, I know yesterday I was just sitting there like, oh, you're not talking about what I'm talking about necessarily, because like my project is looking at political adaptations and like responses to political movements a lot of the time. And I'm just like, oh, but that's great. I'm going to write that source down. I'm going to go find that. Oh, I have that book. Why don't I have that source right now in front of me? Let me go get it from my bookshelf type thing. So I just love how we can learn from each other constantly. It's so fantastic.
I find that part of that is what I've come to think of as the magpie response. Listen to somebody give a 20-minute presentation and 19 minutes of it passes completely without reaction from me. but the 20th minute makes me think, holy cow, what a cool, I can use that.
Yeah.
Or that's not what I think. Or
Mhm.
I need to know more about that.
Mhm.
That's one of the reactions, the magpie reaction. But the other one is, wow, look at what people are talking about. I never could have talked
Mhm.
about this. That is so cool. I'm so happy to see that the field is going on in ways that I never could have envisioned.
Mhm.
That really makes me much more relieved about my own limitations. So on that subject, how does it feel to collaborate with your students as you did so wonderfully yesterday?
Well, first off, thank you to everyone who's put this conference together for letting them come. They were so excited. And they were really proud of the work they put together. I'm also really incredibly proud of them. They put so much work into that class. It was a group of seniors who did their senior seminar, and because someone let me be in charge of that, I decided to make it about adaptation, and it went so well. They dug into the theory from your new book, Tom, Engagements with Adaptation, which meant they're sitting there at the conference going, wait, I know that person. I remember reading about that person, which was really exciting for them to see how they could put those different ideas together. But they also just committed to the work in a way that I really appreciated. Two of them took their projects and collaborated together to make a co-presentation so that they could both participate. They all like spent time giving each other feedback, working on each other's stuff, being ready. Even just the idea of, I asked them when we were prepping, do you want to be in the room together or do we want to be on our own computers, even though it might cause tech issues? Do you want to be in the room together? And they were like, yes, we want to be together while we present. And so even just them being able to clap for each other was wonderful in the moment, and something that I think adds to the conference experience, even when you're online. It was also nice to see all the claps pop up as they presented too, of course. But I don't know. I think you have to like teaching to be in the jobs that we have. I think teaching's so important, which is why I'm part of the pedagogy stuff on adaptation today. And it's great to see them get excited too.
As far as professionalism is concerned, I, for instance, was touched, and not one of your students said, I'm not an adaptation professional.
They did not.
Right, obvious coaching on somebody's part. But I was also struck by the fact that if they hadn't been identified in advance as your students, I would not have identified them as newbies at all. The presentations were varied, they were mature, they were judicious, and they respected the 10-minute limit considerably more than the presentations of their seniors on average. I assume that they'll lose this in time.
We might have practiced that quite a bit, Tom. I won't pretend that isn't true.
I think the electric shock button does something too along those, that's why, of course, it's good to be in the same room. Apart from the people you've already collaborated with, are there particular kinds of people that you dream of collaborating with in the future?
You know, I really just like when we can have overlaps with different fields. So the project that I presented on yesterday, I go to a multi-ethnic American literature conference every year, which is MELIS, and I would be one of the only people there talking about an adaptation. And so I wanted to reach out and say, hey, do you guys realize that you're doing a lot of this too? Can we put these things together more concretely and see what happens with that? And so I just want to see how many ways we can bring those things in and put those things together. I know Beth was also talking about that too, where it's like, hey, I was already talking about some of these things. It gives me space to explore ideas. And I want to just keep imagining like ways that we can show other people that they don't need to say, I'm not an adaptation scholar, but like I want them to also be like, no, but you probably are in some way. All these things are connected in really fascinating features of literature and culture, and adaptation studies is just a wonderful way to be able to explore that. So it's a bit of a non-answer, I know, but it is what I want.
No. Actually, that's the right kind of answer, it seems to me, or a perfectly reasonable kind of answer.
I do appreciate Rachel quite a bit, though. Rachel Hartnett, who I'm editing right now. She's a very good collaborator, I'd like to acknowledge.
I love going to adaptation conferences because that's where I see my peeps. But I think there's a special value that I will always attach to SAMLA because there was always the chance that somebody who was confused or drunk would walk into one of our sessions and then would ask questions from completely outside our silo. And we would sort of gather around that person and stroke them and say, not there, it'll all be okay, but we would like to hear more. Give us your perspective. Tell us more about what you're doing. That sounds so cool. So do you have any tips yourself for any newcomers who'd like to become more active in the adaptation community?
Don't be afraid to actually talk to people is mainly my suggestion. I said a version of this on the Adaptation Today podcast once, but be brave is kind of my biggest suggestion. We're a really welcoming community, honestly. This is why we have something like Adaptation Today, to build connections and to build those ideas up. And you'd be surprised how open everyone here is to building up ideas with you and working with you. My first adaptation presentation was actually with Bill Mooney, who I see in the chat. And I was on a panel with just him, and he was so welcoming, even though I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't say I wasn't an adaptation scholar because I was also a grad student and didn't feel like I was anything, but I was so relieved to feel like everyone was willing to listen to what I had to say and then actually give me feedback and advice on how I could enter into those academic conversations. So be brave and actually talk to people. And Adaptation Today is a great way to do that.
One last example of being brave. From one of my early SAMHSA conferences, I remember a presenter whom I will not identify, who had the world's most elaborate tech. Nothing worked. The sound didn't work. The projector didn't work. The clips didn't work. The PowerPoint didn't work. I thought I would weep. I thought, oh, this person is going to be so distraught. We will never hear from this person again. But evidently, I wasn't the only one who felt that way, because at the end of the panel, everybody inundated this person with questions and solicitude and concern. And as a result, this person has become one of the most active people in the SAMHSA cluster. Not only returning once, but returning basically every year and taking increasingly prominent roles. So if you and I had been last on the program, as Seda promised me we would be, I would now ask a question of everyone else in attendance.
No. Özlem and I still here. We're not done.
In that case, I'm not going to ask my question, but we'll turn this over to Seda.
Okay. Let me this time where is Özlem? Özlem is here. Okay, here we are. It's interesting that since this is our first time trying this Pitch Your Colleague event, both Julie, Tom, and I are doing this in completely different ways, which I enjoy very much right now. So here's another completely different version of pitching someone. So today I get to introduce someone who is both my friend and my colleague, and honestly, one of the easiest people for me, at least, to say, yes, put us on the same team. So I'm pitching Dr. Özlem Akdoğan, a former Fulbright scholar at Harvard and who is currently an associate professor at Muğla Sıtkı Koçman University in Turkey. I have worked with Özlem in so many different settings that I've basically run every possible stress test of collaboration. We were classmates. We've done edited collection work together. We traveled together. We took care of one another's cats, which is, if you know, is the biggest responsibility among the ones that I've been listing here. And we've been at conferences together for years. One of my favorite shared memories being the AS conference in London back in 2015. And then again, years later, being together at AS Istanbul in 2025, which really did feel full circle. Also, a particular bonding detail, Özlem and I are both former students of late Lawrence Rowe. So we were shaped early by the very special pedagogy of being both praised and challenged in the same sentence. And if you know Lawrence, you know exactly what I mean. It's like an academic boot camp but with affection. So now, if you take a few things from this pitch, let them be the following. First one is, Özlem's reliability to me is a personality trait. She's the kind of collaborator you can trust with deadlines, responsibilities, and the invisible labor of projects. She won't make you send a second email to remind you of stuff. If you tell her, Özlem, I need X by Friday, you can just relax. It will arrive. And if you need a last-minute support to organize a panel for your conference, which was my case in Istanbul this June, you better call Özlem. She'll just take care of it for you. Also, I'll be honest, because this event is about real collaboration, I think, to my experience, Özlem thrives in projects where communication is steady and timelines are respected. So if you're juggling a lot right now, tend to be slower on email, or need a more flexible pace, it may not be the smoothest match. But if you like clear plans, shared accountability, and calm competence, then yes, she's your person. So the second thing that I would like to talk about Özlem is a little bit about her scholarship. She does bold, politically awake adaptation work, and I think she does it with craft. On paper, her research interests sit at the intersection of political drama, Shakespearean rewritings and adaptations, and verbatim documentary theater. But let me translate that into what she actually does and what she brings to the table. She's one of those scholars who takes adaptation seriously as a form of political thinking across page, screen, and stage. She's basically working on how history gets staged, how testimony becomes theater, and how adaptation becomes a tool for public memory. For instance, and this is my personal favorite, she has a significant book chapter, by the way, Adaptation in Turkish Literature, Cinema, and Media, Belgrave 2025, order for your libraries. But in this book chapter, she's focusing on the adaptation of history on the Turkish stage through Bilgesu Erenüz Çağrı and Genco Erkal Sivas 93. And for those who may not be familiar with the context, which I know many of you are not, these are very specific Turkish context topics and theaters. These are the kinds of political issues academics in Turkey self-censor themselves for various reasons. Not Özlem though. Like if you want to write about something that people are hesitant to write about, you better call Özlem again. On the Shakespearean adaptation side, she writes about what it means to repurpose Shakespeare politically in the 20th and 21st century adaptations, and this framework is particularly valuable for anyone working on rewriting, appropriation, translation, or afterlives of Shakespeare. And she's also, I think, published on the values of adaptation in a collection edited by Lawrence Rowe, using Edward Bohn's Lear as a case study. In addition to her scholarship, Özlem does writes for public-facing platforms as well. She has multiple pieces on Turkish Shakespeare's performance culture on a blog called Turkish Shakespeare's. You may want to look at that blog. It's very interesting. And I think it's in collaboration with Murat and Folger Library, I believe. And she has a strong work on politics of ethnic identity and gender in writing as well, like her article on Julia Pascal's The Yiddish Queen Lear. So if your adaptation work crosses into screen cultures, she has also published on film adaptations as well, such as her recent article on Merchant Ivory's adaptation of Kazuo Ishiguro's The Remains of the Day, which examines nostalgia for a conservative Englishness and cultural politics through adaptation. To the chat, Özlem, could you please drop all that folder that I kindly asked you to write?
Of course.
Our pull on this attempt is that we're going to share her works with you in the chat as a zip file, so you can download and check in detail if you're interested. But if you're looking for someone to collaborate with on documentary, verbatim theater, and adaptation as political engagement and counter memory, and Shakespeare rewritings, reception, fidelity, and afterlives, Özlem to me is a brilliant partner. And my final comments, I want to finish with some personal stories, is the fact that Özlem is she's a funny person, truly. People sometimes assume that the most organized person in the room is also the most serious. Well, that's not the case for her. She's one of the funniest people I have ever met. And here's a memory I always remember when I think about Özlem. 11 years ago in London, we were students trying to attend conferences on the smallest possible budget. And at one point, I ended up in a couch surfing situation that was, let's say, character building. Because on my first night in the United Kingdom, for the very first time, I found myself helping the host wipe down the walls because they were clean. Next morning, next morning, I arrive at Özlem's place. Like, I feel like I fought a Victorian sanitation crisis in London. And she calmly saves the day. And somehow, a few hours later, we're in the Globe Theatre watching a play. And on the tube back, people, Özlem starts mimicking the faces of different cars. You know how cars have these front designs? She's doing a Toyota Corolla and then some other model with her face, headlights, grill, and whole thing. We were crying, laughing. Everyone is staring at us. And honestly, it's one of those moments when you realize this is not just a smart scholar. This is a person who brings joy to the conversation as well. So if you want a collaborator who is rigorous, who is politically engaged, and unapologetic and unafraid of difficult topics, extremely reliable, and genuinely fun to work with, I'm introducing you to that person. Özlem,
wow, Seda. Thank you so much. Is it normal how embarrassed I feel at the moment? I think it was Beth who mentioned about being embarrassed in the first part of this session. I wouldn't imagine that I would feel so embarrassed. And you also somehow made me feel like I think I'm walking on the verges of obsessive responsibility disorder. Is this something that that exists? I don't know, but yeah, it feels like you're emphasizing a lot about my responsibility freak nature. But yeah, anyway, thanks so much for this generous introduction. I am always lucky to have you as a friend and a collaborator, and I somehow keep thinking about how much I refer to you each time I write on a film adaptation, and how well you offer guidance and also theoretical insights. Since your book project, which I enjoyed deeply, you included me in many other things. And this has happened actually within the final 2 years. We first did the podcast for the adaptation today. I find myself very privileged to be involved there. Then you also extended your hand and told me to make a panel on adaptation of history in the last year's Adaptation Studies Conference in Istanbul, which also gave me an opportunity to meet wonderful people in the field. And now here being pitched by you tells me that I think I have not disappointed you, which is wonderful to know. And thanks again for your appreciation. To talk a little bit about the work I am doing at the moment, yes, I have actually sent everyone my file that includes the adaptation work I have done so far. But let me tell a little bit about the work that I am doing at the moment, the work that has not been published so far. Currently, I actually recently revised a book chapter for a manuscript on the image of the father in European cinema and theater. And I wrote on the self-adaptation of Florian Zeller and Christopher Hampton's adaptation of The Father. I am exploring the dysfunctional father-daughter relationship in the movie as opposed to the play. I would like to see how it evolves with the change of the medium. The second project that I'm working at the moment actually involves a book chapter. Again, I'm writing on Turkish Shakespeare's project. I also sent the link to this for people here.
Adaptation today, right?
Turkish Shakespeare's
The link went to adaptationtoday.com. I remember, like we found.
Yes, definitely. So my colleague, friend Murat Öğütçü, he's also doing wonderful work on Shakespeare, especially Shakespeare adaptations in Turkey. So we are co-editing a manuscript titled Turkish Adaptations in Shakespeare, Turkish Adaptations of Shakespeare, which we hope to actually be able to publish with the Palgrave Studies in Adaptation and Visual Culture. So there, for that book project, I am writing a chapter sorry, I'm writing a chapter on the digitized adaptations of Shakespeare for the modern Turkish audiences who are accustomed to consuming fast media. And for another project Murat is doing with some other co-editors on women and their adaptations, their approaches to Shakespeare in Turkey, I'm writing on an adaptation of King Lear by rural Turkish women. And I'm actually discussing their approach from the perspective of Jacques Rancière's Emancipated Spectator. And as Seda also mentioned, I am also working on documentary theater, verbatim theater, which is the project that actually started with my Fulbright project. And also for your book, I did a very experiential work on how this might function on the Turkish stage in Turkish drama. And I actually realized that I enjoyed it a lot. So now I'm actually doing this, thank you. I'm doing this for English, the British representations of verbatim theater. And my most recent paper on this is on Gillian Slowo's Grenfell, In the Words of Survivors, which is a verbatim piece formulated with the interviews of the survivors of the Grenfell fire in London. So it is again politically challenging because it scrutinizes the accountability of the leaders, and also it challenges the media representations of this event. So as you can see from this trajectory, I would be very happy to collaborate on projects that involve screen adaptations of dramatic texts, Shakespeare, of course, and his afterlives, and works that approach or that might approach history as adaptable material. I think I find this quite innovative. And of course, I'd like to connect and continue these conversations. Thank you so much again.
Thank you so much, Özlem, for joining us. Okay, so let me remove the spotlights from us so that we can all see one another. Julie, I have a question for you and Tom and everyone in the panel. So up until this part of this panel, we planned everything. From here on, we have no idea what's going to happen because the rest is really depend on our audience, who may or may not join us to ask questions or maybe offer some collaborations here on site, and then we will shake hands on it. We don't know yet, but this is the floor. This is the moment that we open the floor to everyone else if they would like to join the conversation.
Yes. And I am wondering, do we want to establish a forum for dialogue with new scholars in adaptation studies or early career scholars or established scholars who are new to adaptation studies? I mean, I learned so much just in the last 45 minutes. But I don't know. I love the dialogue, and I was thinking about so many related issues that I think all of us think about a lot, including the fact that, Tom, even though you don't like to collaborate in your writing, you are one of the most collaborative scholars I know. My goodness, to be continued, LFA, AAS, mentoring people.
Nemla,
Pamela,
what was the one in the West?
LFAAS, Pamela.
Pamela.
So anyway, just have to throw that in there.
Also, writing a lot of really good epilogues or conclusions to collections and things, which is really important too. Just putting that out there as maybe someone who's going to benefit from that work very soon.
You know, and if I could also say that one of the books in the Palgrave series is called The Scandal of Adaptation. And speaking of SAMLA and its centrality to the field and Tom's kind of and Beth's work for SAMLA, like that book was a labor of love, according to Tom, that came out of SAMLA. It came out of panels at SAMLA and issues that came up at SAMLA, and the idea of scandal and adaptation came out of SAMLA. So I think that's also a kind of important example of what we're talking about.
Julie, if we are kind of started to pitch one another, and if Tom is under the spotlight, I want to turn it to you as well then, because your work with Barton on adaptation and visual culture series in Palgrave is just wonderful in the sense that I mean, there are many other publication houses who have their own series for issues related to adaptation studies, but I have never ever seen anywhere like yours that is willing to include so many marginalized cinema, so many diverse voices. You have books on Czech cinema, on Turkish cinema, and we were able to make these things happen thanks to you and Barton. So I don't think that we can underestimate your efforts and labor to making this community collaborative as well. And the other thing, people, I know this, if this is a personal information going out, but last time when we were in NEMLA in Boston, I ended up by mistake seeing Julie's Google Calendar, and oh boy, like this this person is the busiest bee I have ever seen, who's not just doing these edited collections, but also taking her students to Bologna Il Cinema Ritrovata Film Festival every single summer. One summer I get the chance to join them. So we're not just talking about a person who's collaborating in her works, but who's collaborating with early career learners, with her students. So yeah, I just wanted to turn the spotlight to you as well.
Thank you. That's very, very kind. But I think part of the reason why many of us are drawn to adaptation studies is because we are lifelong learners, and we love how much we learn with every new collaboration and every new project and every experience at a conference. So, you know, it's exciting. You know, I'm so grateful to adaptation studies for creating the context for that lifelong learning to continue. So thank you.
And now, since we've taken turns pitching each other, I'm sorry, Seda, feel free to turn off your camera. I would like to retrospectively pitch Seda by telling a story. Years ago, when Seda was working with me as a graduate student at the University of Delaware, she suggested to me that we ought to host the LFA conference at Delaware. And I said, oh, that would be a terrible choice. We're nowhere near any place. Nobody would come. And she said, no, actually, we're quite close to 2 international airports. We can easily arrange transportation. There are on-site conference locations. There's a hotel on campus. Of course we could do this. And I said, well, I was really embarrassed that she'd thought of all these things. So I said, I'm sorry, but that's just too much work for me. I couldn't possibly arrange a conference. I've seen other people and the work is backbreaking and I'm not suited for it. So I'm going to have to say no. And she said, I don't see why you should say no. I'm the one who would be doing all the work anyway. And I'm perfectly willing to do the work. I would be delighted to do the work. It would be an honor to do the work. And I said, I really don't think that it's fair to lay that kind of workload on a graduate student. So I'm going to have to reiterate my refusal to do this. Right, I can already see the facial reactions to this conversation. Yes, I would say now, having lived through this terrible conversation, having gone to several conferences that Seda has co-organized, and particularly the last AAS conference in Istanbul, I would say I would trust Seda with my life at a conference, which I think of as the world's most hellish collaborative experience imaginable. So thank you, Seda, more than I can ever express.
My God, thank you. And people, you have no idea, he's my advisor. He's like so many things for me. So hearing this is just so much. Thank you.
This is the best possible ending to this panel. I would just like to say that you all are just pitching each other too. This is wonderful. I'm so happy right now.
So in that case, people, this is something that we try to create based on your needs and demands in relation to the poll, in relation to the answers that you gave us in our poll. I hope we did manage to, you know, meet your expectations, at least starting the chances of collaboration. We will be in touch about the Pitch Your Colleague event, and if you would like to see more of it, if you would like to do your version of it, or maybe if we need to revise or adapt this whole setup to something that might be more useful to your needs, because as we always say, Adaptation Today is there for us as a community and for our needs, and we will be getting feedbacks about this whole academic matchmaking event to see where it can go, or if it should go somewhere. Julie, would you like to do the last words?
Just thank you so much, Seda. And I can't echo Tom's remarks enough about your energy and your imagination across all platforms. So thank you for all you've done.
Okay.
And thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much, Katie, Özlem, and Beth as well. In that case, should we pass the flag to our next panelists? Let's do that.